After struggling with depression and anxiety and drug and alcohol addiction for almost 12 years, I finally discovered the one thing that helped me to deal with all of my problems once and for all. And in this video, I'm going to share with you what that one thing is so that you know the quickest and easiest way to deal with anxiety. My name is Stephen Boylan. I'm an author, motivational speaker, client acquisition specialist and psychotherapist. And I'm also the founder of Natural. So to share with you what that one thing is that finally helped me to deal with all of my problems, I need to take you all the way back to 1993. So it's a summer's day way back in 1993. The sun is shining in the sky. The birds are singing in the trees. There's that gentle breeze blowing through the trees as I'm walking through the park. But I've got this gut-wrenching feeling in the pit of my stomach. I've just found out that my mum has been rushed to hospital. I need to get home. I need to get back home to my family to find out what's gone on with my mum. So I'm racing through the park and the anxiety inside of me is racing around as I get closer and closer to my house. And I walk into my house and everybody is hysterical. My dad's crying, my sisters are crying, my brothers are crying, and at this point I begin crying myself. Everybody is hysterical. I find out at this point that my mum has been rushed to hospital because she's had a massive stroke. So we all race down to the hospital to see our mum, to find out what's going on. And as we get to the hospital, I'm walking down the corridor with my brothers, my sisters and my dad. And we get to the room where our mum is. And I look in and I can see my mum there, lying in a bed. But she doesn't look like my mum because all of her face has dropped on one side. At this point, we go in to the room and walk over to our mum. And our mum can't speak. She can't communicate. She can't move a muscle. All I can see is that there is a tear in her eye. And unfortunately, on that day, the 5th of July, 1993, my mum sadly passed away at the very young age of only 49. And from that day on, my life started to spiral out of control. I started to misuse alcohol. I then, unfortunately, got involved with misusing drugs. And my life became a living hell. And I soon become very depressed and very anxious as a result. And then in 2002, something amazing happened. I found out that I was a dad to my beautiful daughter whose name is Jasmine. And at this point, I know I need to change my life for Jasmine. I want to be a great dad for Jasmine. But I just know I can't be a great dad if I'm misusing drugs, misusing alcohol, and struggling excessively with depression and anxiety. So at this point, I went to the doctors and he gave me antidepressants. But they did nothing for me. If anything, they made me feel even worse. But I didn't want to give up. I knew I needed to change my life, but I continued on that negative spiral of hell. Misusing drugs, misusing alcohol, and struggling with depression and anxiety. And then in 2004, something amazing happened again. I found out I was a dad again. I'm going to be a dad again to my beautiful daughter, whose name is Tamsin. And then I just knew I needed it at that point to really change my life from both my beautiful daughters so I could be a great dad for them. And so I went to a group therapy, and at this point I was a little bit skeptical about going to this group because I'd tried antidepressants, they didn't work. I tried one-on-one counselling, that didn't work. But at this point I was willing to do anything for my daughters and for myself as well. So I went to this group therapy, and back then I didn't know that there were lots of different types of therapies. That some that were more effective at dealing with the problems that I was struggling with. And at this point I go through the therapy, and I can honestly say, sitting here now, it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. I was finally able to deal with the drug and alcohol addiction. Then I began to deal with the depression and the anxiety. I decided at that point that I wanted to do more with my life. I decided that I wanted to help young people to hopefully not make a lot of the similar mistakes that I've made in my life. So I decided to go to college and train as a youth worker so that I could help young people to hopefully avoid making a lot of similar mistakes that I've made in my life. And then in 2007, I successfully qualified as a youth worker, and I gained employment with St. Helens Council, where I worked for over 7 years, helping young people. And along the way, I met the love of my life, and her name is Claire. And Claire has a beautiful son who I brought up since he was 18 months old, and I now consider him obviously as the son of mine. And he called me Dad. And now me and Claire have got a beautiful daughter whose name is Alice Rose. And my life has completely transformed as a result of going to that group therapy and engaging in the therapy that I engaged in. And then I decided along the way as well that I wanted to be able to help people who had struggled with a lot of the problems that I had in my life. So I decided to go to college again and train as a counsellor. And then in 2010, I successfully qualified as an integrative counsellor. And while studying counselling, I discovered that there were lots of different types of therapies. And one therapy in particular that was really effective in dealing with depression and dealing with anxiety and drug and alcohol addiction. And that one therapy that I discovered while studying counselling is cognitive behavioural therapy. And that was the one therapy that helped me to deal with all of my problems. And that's been responsible for me helping thousands of people over the past 8 years to deal with depression, anxiety, and many other problems that I've helped them with. And it's responsible for helping millions of people all over the world to deal with depression and anxiety and many other problems. Cognitive behavioural therapy is identified as being one of the most effective therapies for dealing with depression and anxiety. It is one of the first choice treatments recommended by the NHS here in the UK for dealing with depression and anxiety. So what exactly is cognitive behavioral therapy? Well, cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the only therapies that has been scientifically tested and proven to be effective in dealing with depression and anxiety. It's based on the science that your thoughts and your behavior directly impact on the way you feel emotionally and physiologically, and that many people, when struggling with depression or anxiety, get stuck in what we call a negative trap. So, for example, they have negative thoughts about the past, about themselves, about the future, which creates intense anxiety and depression and sadness, which then results in them avoiding doing things that they would normally do, that they would normally find interesting, that they would normally find fun, and that again impacts on the way that they feel emotionally. They become isolated. The physiology is impacted on. They stop eating, they struggle to get asleep, and people get stuck in that negative trap, just like I was, struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, struggling with depression and anxiety, because I was stuck in that negative trap of hell for almost 12 years. But the science of cognitive behavioral therapy suggests that if you really want to be able to break that negative trap of depression or anxiety, then you need to be able to challenge and change the way that you think. You need to be able to deal with negative thoughts. But it can be really difficult to deal with negative thoughts. But that is not going to be a problem for you, because in the next video, in this 3-part video series, I'm going to share with you how to deal with negative thoughts. I'm going to share with you the most effective cognitive behavioral strategy for dealing with negative thoughts. So all I'd love you to do right now is leave me a comment below this video. Just tell me what you thought about this video. It would really help me. Or if you've got any specific questions, I would really love to help you out. Just leave that comment below. And then, more importantly, if you want to learn how to deal with negative thoughts, which is absolutely essential if you want to be able to break that negative trap of depression and anxiety, then make sure you look out for my next email, where I'm going to share with you a link directly to the next video, where I'm going to talk all about how you deal with negative thoughts. Thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to sharing that with you in the next one. Thank you and goodbye.